recorded, but all the panelists that we have should have the ability to unmute yourselves. So including some of our delegates, senators, and MDOT and county staff. So hopefully that'll work out. We'll be paying attention to chat boxes and emails and text messages. If anything needs to happen, we will. There's also the WebEx admin address here to get to Sean Masterson. I will be trying to serve a bit as a host tonight, and then Sean Masterson, who we've talked about, is our technical host from our county DTCS. So we also have approximately 24 attendees on the call. They won't have rights to be speaking, but we did provide an email address where people could send questions into our Office of Transportation. That's transportation@howardcountymd.gov. So after our elected officials have a chance to make comments or ask some questions, we will go to those if we need to. So with that, I'll just say that our basic agenda as here is as in basically in past years, but I'm going to turn it over to the county executive here in a second, and we'll follow this order unless we need to change something up for technical glitches. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ball to make a few opening remarks.
Bruce, I'm not getting any audio. Or is anything?
Yep. He is unmuted, so I lost his picture on. I can see county executive. Is your mic working? Doesn't seem to be. Yeah, we're still not getting audio. While we work that out, I would point out that the participant in the chat buttons, you can do a raise hand in the bottom. If you open your participant list, you should see a raise hand. You can do that and we'll try to acknowledge you. And then the chat feature, we also are trying to pay attention to that as well. I see Terry working on the issue for the county executive. So
Bruce, no hurry. Happy to kind of let him work through it. We're getting used to these types of issues, no matter who we're meeting with. So
okay. Well, while that's being worked out, I'll maybe we go through and acknowledge some of the elected officials that I see on the participant list. So Senator Lamb, I see has joined us. Council Chair Deb Young has joined.
Are you able to hear me now?
Hey, there we go. Yes.
All right. I'm going to start all over, but the first run through was so much better. So what are your expectations now? First of all, thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Secretary Slater, to you and your entire team for being available tonight to present your 6-year capital program and recent activities. We have several of our elected officials here in attendance, and I am looking forward to both your presentation as well as their questions. I know this is a difficult year for MDOT, and that pandemic and decisions made prior to you becoming secretary has made your first year quite a difficult one. Last year, we received a precursor of MDOT's financial problems with the elimination of funding for US 29 transit and highway improvements, but none of us expected to face this level of financial challenge when we met last year. Despite all the challenges you face with declining transportation revenues, we want to thank you for recent grant awards from MDOT's competitive grant programs. Our transportation priorities in Howard County include a focus on accessible and reliable transit, creating a more pedestrian-friendly transportation network, and making our roadways safer for all users. These goals have benefited from several MDOT and USDOT grant awards in the past 2 years, including $1.2 million in federal funds to purchase 3 replacement buses and automated bus stop announcement system for our RTA, construction funding for our North Laurel Connection project to create a pathway for bicyclists and pedestrians between North Laurel and Savage, and funding for our roadway safety enforcement efforts from the Office of Highway Safety. We hope that you can continue these programs in the next few years as we prepare even more projects for submission. Unfortunately, the bigger financial picture that you have come to present is quite concerning. I would be remiss if I didn't echo the disappointment stated by many voices in the Baltimore region in recent weeks regarding the impacts of the budget reductions on our transportation system. Many households lack access to a car, and far more lack access to a car for each worker in the household. With the proposals to cut transit in the Baltimore region, MDOT is dealing a blow to a workforce that lacks alternatives and will create further challenges for our regional employers. The most recent round of reductions to our regional transit system cannot be viewed in isolation to the pandemic, and the concerns you're hearing are amplified by previous decisions. Despite the best efforts of MTA leaders, the governor and MDOT have not quite lived up to the financial responsibilities that we had hoped to invest in an acceptable transit system to the Baltimore region. And I'm concerned that the cuts proposed in your budget go too deep, and I believe we can do more to explore alternatives to keep our transportation system viable when we start to return to more normal travel in the coming months and years. Significant cuts in Baltimore compared to no budget reductions for WMATA in your current plan is of even more concern. Even in Howard County, which is nearly evenly divided in our commuter patterns to and from both Baltimore and Washington. We need MDOT and the governor to take a closer look at how to balance the impact of the current revenue loss more fairly across our state. We would like to better understand your plan and the solutions to the setbacks endured by the Purple Line P3, which could have impacts on the level of transit investment throughout the Baltimore region. And we would like to encourage even more creative, innovative thinking about how existing or future federal funds can be used to scale back some of the transit reductions currently proposed. Despite the financial challenges, we have an opportunity here to reimagine how our transit system can work better for all our residents, no matter their zip code. Some of these reductions are understandable in the short term, but in the long term, we need to work collaboratively with the governor to address the growing population and the urgent need for thoughtful transit throughout all of Central Maryland. In Howard County, we've seen the elimination of the Route 150 line, which is the most problematic. As Administrator Quinn knows from his discussions with the delegation last week, the Route 150 line is the only MTA Link bus line into Howard County that provides reverse commute options, and it serves the same high priority transit corridor we're looking to improve within the recently adopted regional transit plan. Elimination of 3 Mark Camden line runs, which are understandable, again, in the short term, but we can't lose those opportunities if demand comes back in the coming years. Modifications to commuter buses also, understandable, but when demand returns, we would like to see improved branding and marketing of that service. And also, FTA CARES Act funding will help us offset a projected loss of over $1 million in state funding to RTA annually. But we will have concerns in FY23 if state or federal funding isn't increased by then. These significant concerns aside, please be assured that Howard County is ready and willing to continue our work with MDOT to plan for a better transportation system for Maryland. And our residents depend upon our sustained diligence as we plan for the future. We look forward to working on the implementation of the recently adopted Central Maryland Transportation Plan and the development of the statewide transit plan. Route 40 corridor planning is an early opportunity, priority, and an even bigger reason to retain MTA Route 150 express bus service. US 29 corridor is a longer-term priority for congestion relief and future connections between Columbia and the Montgomery County Flash Transit Service. However, in the meantime, as MDOT manages its way through this financial crisis, we ask that you also keep a clear eye out for any short-term opportunities to help us advance vital roadway safety projects. I want to personally thank you again for your time last month as we discussed roadway safety continuing to be a shared priority. And in Howard County, even in the midst of this economic crisis, we continue to have roadway safety as a priority. We're continuing our investment in the design of US 1 safety plan improvements, and we will need $3 million in construction funding. We'll be submitting grant applications for the bike ped projects to support our Complete Streets initiatives. And these grants will support projects like the Dobbin Road pedestrian and sidewalk improvements, the Patuxent Branch Trail construction upon completion of the design in the next year, the regional Patapsco Greenway improvements. And that's part of the coordinated efforts between BMC, DNR, SHA, Baltimore County on the Elkridge to Guinness Spur to address a lack of mobility between Howard and Baltimore County. And our South Entrance Trail to provide connections to new development in downtown Columbia across the current barriers of 29 and Broken Land Parkway. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize the need to continue to improve the draft plan that you are about to present to our delegation and the County Council representatives this evening. The big and small improvements to this draft are important, and whether that be the restoration of the 150 express bus service between Baltimore City and Columbia, or rebalancing of the regional impacts to the full scope of the CTP reductions. Thank you again for your time and your willingness to talk with us, to plan with us, and to work with us.
Absolutely, Mr. County Executive. Thank you so much for having me here today. I just want to say first and foremost, good evening. It looks like as I've listened to your presentation, I think I'm going to touch on everything but the purple line. So I'm happy to circle back on that one as I go through my remarks. But first, good evening, Mr. County Executive, members of your team, members of the council, members of the delegation. I'm really happy to be here this evening. I always enjoy visiting all the counties in the fall, and I'm hoping we can get together in person soon when it's safe for everyone. But for the record, my name is Greg Slater. I'm Secretary, Maryland Department of Transportation. And I just want to again thank you for inviting us here today to provide an overview of our draft 6-year Consolidated Transportation Program, the CTP that covers fiscal years 2021 to 2026. Of course, in an effort to practice social distancing and protect you and the residents of your county, we're holding these CTP tours virtually for the first time ever. And to follow along, please go to ctp.maryland.gov to view the current CTP. First, I'd like to introduce the MDOT team that's here with me today. First and foremost, our new State Highway Administrator, Mr. Tim Smith. Tim and I worked together for many, many years. I believe he is a Howard County resident, taking over the State Highway Administration, as well as our new District Engineer, Terry Seuss. From the Maryland Transportation Authority, I have Planning and Program Development Director, Melissa Williams. From the Transit Administration, I have Administrator Kevin Quinn. From the Motor Vehicle Administration, I have Administrator Chrissy Nizer. And from the Maryland Aviation Administration, I have Executive Director Ricky Smith and Regional Aviation Assistance Director Ashish Solanki. I have worked with every single one of these men and women over the course of my 20+ years at MDOT, and I can tell you that they're as good as they come. Also joining us from the Secretary's Office, our Regional Planner, Dan Janasek, Director of Government Affairs, Jeff Tozy, and our State Legislative Officer, Pilar Helm. When I talk about this program, I see challenges and opportunities. I am very familiar with the CTP tour process after more than 20 years at MDOT, talking about highway projects in these fall meetings. I did my first CTP tour meeting as a new SHA planning director in 2008. So I have a lot of history with the programs and the projects and the efforts that we've worked together on. We've collaborated on some of them. We fought for some of these together, and we've gotten a lot of these things done together, and I look to continue that. Many of the priorities in local jurisdictions like yours, I've worked on from the early planning phases, so I'm very familiar with where they are and the importance of them. But I'm humbled to be here today addressing you for the first time as Secretary in these historically challenging times, keeping our transportation network moving, and during this pandemic, health crisis, and major economic downturn has been the challenge of my life. And I am leaning back on many of those lessons in the recession in 2008 in that planning director seat in the program lessons that we're working on today. And while I certainly never envisioned serving as Transportation Secretary during a financial and health crisis, this experience has only reiterated the crucial role that transportation plays in every one of our everyday lives. Our transportation network has been critical to keeping the supply chain moving and getting those essential workers to work during this pandemic, helping us with this recovery. From day one, our goal has been to protect our employees and our customers. We continue to work hard to keep people moving, but also keep the system safe. This draft CTP is a direct result of drastic reductions in travel from this pandemic. Let me spend some time and walk through the numbers of the CTP. When I compare 2020 from a travel perspective to the same week in 2019, the second week of April, during the peak of the stay-at-home order, travel was down at an all-time low, while the third week of September is starting to show some return trends. Our highway travel volumes in the peak were down 52%. They're down 14% now. So we're seeing that rebound of traffic in very different patterns. The peaks are spread much differently and the times are different, but the volumes are coming back. Our truck volumes didn't see as drastic a decline. In the peak, they were down 27% as that important supply chain was moving. Right now, they're down about 13%. Our toll transactions were down 57% in the peak. Now they're down 19%. So you're starting to see this pattern. BWI Marshall Airport, the passenger traffic was down 95% at the peak. Now we're down 69% and starting to show some recovery. All transit was down 70%, and now we're down 60%. At the port, our monthly container volumes were down 17% in the peak versus 0.2% in August. And we're really hopeful for an even better month. Well, numbers are starting to come from a travel perspective. The first year CTP estimates the Transportation Trust Fund revenue declines across the board. Starting with our motor fuel tax, we were down $636 million in this program. Our titling tax is down $190 million. Our corporate income tax is down $183. MTA operating revenues were down $174 million. Our Maryland aviation operating revenues were down $146 million. And then our other combined sources were another $100 million. So what that means for our 6-year program is over this 6-year forecast period, our total revenue decline of $1.4 billion and a decrease in bond sales of another $1.5 billion means a $2.9 billion impact on our 6-year program. So from a $16.3 billion program in FY20 just 9 months ago, we're down to a $13.4 billion program. This budget reflects some pretty tough decisions that we've had to make in every single one of our business units. Every department took a hit in the 6-year program, as well as the Secretary's office in our capital and our operating budget. I'll start here in the Secretary's office. We had a $23 million reduction in our capital program. Our capital program in the Secretary's budget is mostly grant programs, those types of things, and a 5% cut on our operating budget. Over at SHA, they had a $900 million cut in their capital program and 7% of their operating budget cut. $150 million capital cut and a 5% program hit on the operating budget. Let me pause on the MTA one and address the question that you raised, Mr. County Executive, associated with some of the service cuts on the MTA system. I can assure you that we are hearing loud and clear some of the concerns associated with the proposal that we put on the table. Administrator Kevin Quinn and I are working really hard to try and lay out what alternatives we may have and be able to come back to the group and look at different options and alternatives. But I just want to take a pause and say, Kevin and I spent an hour on the phone last night talking about that very thing. We're looking at different alternatives. We hear you loud and clear. The budget's painful, but we're trying to understand where we can spread some things out, but also in a scalable way, as you mentioned, Mr. County Executive, where you're looking at areas that are way down right now and less of a permanent type of a component. Switching over to the Maryland Aviation Administration, we have a $522 million capital reduction there and 8% of its operating budget. What's important to talk about the capital program in Maryland Aviation is once the revenues start to return at the airport, $500 million of that is associated with airport revenue bonds. So when that market comes back, we'll issue those revenue bonds and we'll be able to recover that part next going. Administration, there was a $227 million hit on capital and a 6% cut to its operating budget. And over at the Motor Vehicle Administration, $25 million in capital, which is mainly facility type improvements, and 4% of its operating budget. And I can assure you that every single one of these cuts weighed heavily on us as we focused on keeping the transportation network and focused on the people that use us and the people that need us. It was really, really a tough exercise. But the reality is cutting $1.9 billion in capital investments and another $98 million in operating costs has an impact that will be felt statewide. And that's why we're really focused on minimizing that impact. And so, what I'll say is where you're going to feel that is, there's going to be some less road maintenance. We'll be able to, we can't maybe do as many aesthetic work type, like we may cut less grass and pick up less litter and those types of things, focusing on those safety aspects where we're making sure folks can see with that vegetation, cutting back on some of those cycles. You'll see some impacts in our facilities. We do have still billions of unfunded state of good repair work and developmental and evaluation work that we really need to do to rebuild that shelf of projects. Our service reductions, of course, will be felt by the many people that rely on that. And that's why we're really thinking about those and rethinking about those constantly to find ways that we can lessen that. Despite the challenges of operating during a pandemic, I do think it's important that I take a minute and talk about the more than 10,000 MDOT employees and our private sector partners that continued to deliver every single day through our outstanding customer service and provide those essential services in every corner of the state and in every business unit of the state. I'll point out a few of our successes during the pandemic where, when there's less travel, there's a little bit of an opportunity to accelerate some things, and we were able to do some things. We completed the Bay Bridge westbound deck rehabilitation just about a year early, you combine less traffic and a little warm weather, we were able to really get some things done. We worked with our hospital network, and we developed a temporary shuttle to route for hospital workers and essential industries during the peak of the pandemic. When we were cutting service, we were still ensuring that our hospital workers and our supply chain workers could get there through shuttle services. We supplied logistical support to the Maryland Department of Health and delivered PPE to the medical community and testing community. We continued behind the scenes to conduct tremendous amount of commercial driver's license testing and to be able to support the economy during that pandemic. We cut the ribbon on the new interchange at 270 and Watkins Mill Road, the added capacity in Maryland 2-4 in Calvert County, and the Maryland 180 bridge widening in Frederick. And we began construction on the ever important Nice Middleton Bridge in Southern Maryland. Really, really critical pieces. Our vision for transportation, when I think back in January when I became secretary, I laid out several priorities. And I would argue today that those priorities don't change. It's just the parameters around them that have changed. And we're really continuing to be focused on those. Those are really critical for us. First and foremost, delivering big infrastructure. We have a lot of big infrastructure projects. You mentioned the Purple Line, critical, important project that we need to deliver for the citizens of the state, and we will deliver for the citizens of the state. So focusing on that big infrastructure, getting that delivery done, and really working through the challenges and focus on incorporating technology and flexibility and future growth into our system. The second thing I really wanted to focus on is prioritizing a state of good repair, making sure we're taking care of the system that we have, a system that we can be proud of, a system that our citizens travel on, and we want to make sure that we're building that and modernizing those assets. We want to provide safe and accessible mobility choices for all of our users, pedestrians, bicyclers, drivers, freight delivery men, transit users. That considers the interplay of transportation and land use and working together to find those solutions. Establishing a sustainable, customer-focused transportation vision that incorporates roadway, transit, freight, air, and port infrastructure. This vision will set the foundation for the development and evaluation program of the CTP in future generations. So we are right now, Mr. County Executive, you mentioned our statewide transit plan. We're really excited about that, but we're also really excited about the next step in that, which is a statewide transportation plan that's going to really lay out in great detail what we think the next generation of the transportation system will look like in Maryland. And we can't do that without collaboration. We can't do that without working together with our local governments and our citizens and our businesses. So we look forward to your partnership in that and working with us to help us shape that vision. Because the next thing we need to invest in is that development program. We need to invest in the next wave of planning and engineering to build that shelf of projects for the next generation. We may not be able to afford big construction projects right now, but we have to invest in what the next generation is going to be for our citizens. But it's going to take some time. When we look at this program, our models are showing us about a 2-year recovery economically. So we looked at fiscal year 21, really assess and adjust. How could we stop what was coming at us and minimize the impact? Getting into fiscal year 22 is about recovery and planning. So right now we're in that recover and plan CTP, where continue that recovery, but lay that foundation with important things like the Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan and our statewide transit plan, and all of the efforts that we need to do to build that developmental program. And then FY23 is about continuing that recovery and stabilize the trust fund. Our citizens rely on the Transportation Trust Fund to be a stable, reliable source of services and programs that we provide. That program has to be stable for us to do that. So by FY23, we really want to focus on that recovery and build that stabilization in. And this $13.4 billion capital budget and $2.2 billion operating budget focused on preserving what we have. And so it really looked at what we can do to plan, what we can do to recover, and what we can do to help play a role in the economic recovery. So what does it look like? When you look across the board, our service modes, our motor vehicle administration, as well as the Secretary's office, we receive about 1.4% of the capital budget and about 14% of the operating budget. Over on the economic engines of the port, of the department, the Port of Baltimore and BWI Marshall Airport, they have about 9.5% of our capital budget and about 11% of our operating budget. On the between MTA and WMATA, They're receiving about 39.2% of our capital budget and 61% of our operating budget, with MTA alone accounting for 41% of our operating budget. That's what's in this year's CTP. Our state highway programs are receiving 39.6% of the budget, of the capital budget, and 13% of the operating budget. And our local jurisdictions are receiving about 10.3% of our capital budget through the highway user revenue grants. We've been able to preserve some really important projects in this budget that were critical for us. Our system preservation efforts across the department were really important. We tried to preserve as much of those as we possibly could. Our light rail vehicle overhaul and the new metro cars over at MTA. MVA's phase 2 of Customer Connect was really important. We wanted to preserve that. Of course, the Howard Street Tunnel at the Port of Baltimore, critically important for the entire region. And our Cox Creek Dredge Placement Program to help us make sure we can maintain that 50-foot berth, keep that economy moving. And when we preserve projects like the Howard Street Tunnel and the Cox Creek Dredge Placement Program, those are really important to Maryland's recovery. The Port of Baltimore has been at the epicenter of this throughout and continues to be, I know, a great source of pride for me. But in the wake of the national recession, we forged a P3 agreement in 2009 with Ports America Chesapeake. That P3 agreement allowed us to build a 50-foot berth and bring 4 Panamax cranes that were when we were cutting our program to the bone. We forged that program. But that built the growing container business that we see at the Port of Baltimore today, and ultimately spurred the next public-private partnership with CSX with the Howard Street Tunnel. So those are really important in our recovery. And that's going to allow our double-stack rail cars to move cargo faster and more efficiently from the port and take more trucks off of our highway system as we're moving that in. During the pandemic, the strength of the Port of Baltimore, and it was very clear. The port continued to receive cargo that helped Maryland's supply chain stay open, and they were bringing in critical medical and food supplies across the state. But the port is just one example of the critical role that we play every day in this network, and we will continue to play in the recovery, whether it's trucks on our highways and bridges, cargo coming in through our port or our airport, whether it's MVA certifying new commercial drivers, or transit providing access to jobs. We have to be there for our citizens. And I won't steal all the positive news from the administrators who are going to update you on a lot of these key projects, but the bottom line is our current budget is pretty tough, and I imagine your local budget's going to be pretty tough too. But we're still making those important investments in our infrastructure to support good jobs and navigate our way through this pandemic. While MDOT is doing, and this program is doing, our absolute best right now and funding what we can, we're continuing to rethink, continuing to develop. But during these drastic revenue declines, we're working with our partners on the federal side to continue to fight for those critical federal dollars. I know, Mr. County Executive, you mentioned them as well. You know, we're really hopeful and working hard. And I tell you, our federal delegation is doing a tremendous job trying to advocate for us. I've had regular conversations with them as a group as well as individually. And frankly, they're just, I'm helping trying to feed them information so that they can advocate for us the best they can. But I do want to spend a minute and talk about that. We are really in a critical point of our program. And without additional help, some of these impacts are going to be very painful across the board. So working together as partners at every level of government, from the municipalities and all of you here in our county government to Maryland's federal delegation, we know we can move this vision forward for Maryland's transportation network in a way that not only is successful, but grows our economy for our children and our children's children. You know, in closing, I do want to take a minute and announce one of the key projects in the Secretary's office budget through our Bikeways program and through our MDOT, our Kim Lampier Bikeways Network program. Those of you who did not meet Kim, she was one of the fiercest bike advocates that I have ever worked with, and a tremendous human being. And it was our honor to dedicate this program to her. But today we announced $3.78 million in FY21 grants to support bike safety and access improvements for projects across the state. And part of that is a $500,000 grant to Howard County. This grant is for the North Laurel Connection Construction Project. It's going to create that 5.6 mile bike route between Laurel and Savage. So, we're really excited about it. And we're going to be highlighting these grants and other bike and pedestrian initiatives in our new Walk Cycle Maryland social media pages for Twitter and Facebook. So I would encourage you to watch those and share those as we enjoy in that success together. But at this point, I'm going to take a pause and turn it over to our new SHA Administrator, Tim Smith, talk a little bit about what's in the highway program this year. So thank you.
Good evening, County Executive Dr. Ball and County Council members. Mic check. Can everyone hear me all right? All right, cool. As Secretary Slater said, I'm Tim Smith, and it's actually an honor to be here and a privilege to be able to lead the state highway team. Our team never really stopped working during this entire pandemic, and we continue to progress on important projects and initiatives. It might be more of my operational background, but I feel like MDOT and State Highway, we really tend to shine when there's a challenge or emergency in front of us. And I really feel like the COVID-19 pandemic was no exception. But we try to keep things, keep it simple. Our primary goal was keeping our customers and our employees safe while delivering on our core functions. So we advanced projects while practicing physical distancing. We followed proper health practices. We met virtually as we're doing right now. And we use appropriate protective equipment following CDC guidelines. As traffic dipped below 50% of our normal expected traffic volumes, our maintenance crews switched to alternating shifts to reduce the number of workers we had at one location at any given time. So we felt like as our workload decreased, we needed to keep them safe. But what it allowed us to do is continue doing appropriate maintenance activities. As Secretary Slater mentioned, as traffic came back, we brought back our maintenance staff full time starting in early July, but with better and proper health protocols. Secretary Slater also mentioned our construction efforts. With fewer vehicles on the roadway, we were able to expand our lane closure times and get more work done and progress and help limit the impact of mobility on our customers. So this tactic allowed us to speed up a few projects, as well as allow us to catch up on a few projects that might have fallen behind. As the Secretary mentioned on our budget impacts, State Highway kind of stayed very focused on continuing our maintenance and construction activities. So as a result of that, there's impacts to that. So we've had to delay certain phases of our planning and design to later years because we've stayed focused on our construction and maintenance. But as we focus on our operational resources, we've had our emphasis on safety and mobility of our system. And as mentioned, it has resulted in fewer mowing cycles and less litter pickup. But the good part about supporting an active construction program, earlier this year we were able to deliver some great projects in Maryland. A few great examples were right here in Howard County. So one is we've continued to progress on our Maryland 32 between Linden Church Road and I-70. We're anticipating completing that in 2022. But what that is, it's really a $126 million project that kind of builds on the success that we had for the expansion from 32 from 108 to Linden Church Road, which we opened in 2019. In addition to that, this summer we opened up the widening of the Triadelphia Road Bridge, which allowed two-way traffic earlier this month, and after a year lane closure. More on the eastern side of the county, we were able to open up a $3 million project to add northbound US 1 acceleration lane and signalize the intersection at Kit Kat Road. In addition to that, we were able to do a $1.6 million expansion of the Maryland 32 park and ride lot at Brokenland Parkway. I'm going to pause there just for a second to just kind of emphasize on safety a little bit. So whether traffic is up or down, what I want to emphasize is just kind of work zone safety as well as our move over laws. What we've noticed, even when traffic was down 50%, is we still had our equipment being hit, even members of our team being struck while assisting disabled vehicles or performing construction or maintenance activities. As Secretary Slater mentioned, I officially took this role in June. 2 weeks into that, I had not the most pleasant experience as one of our contractor partners right here in Howard County had an employee struck and lost their life. So I'm using this platform just to kind of request your support and help as we try to educate folks on the laws to protect our workers, especially when we're in work zones, because I want everyone to kind of go home each night as they continue to deliver great projects. Just in closing, as Secretary Slater mentioned, we're working in State Highway to kind of stabilize and plan for our future. And what that means for State Highway is mainly three main areas, and that's asset management, accessibility, and mobility. And asset management is really about using a system preservation philosophy to think long-term in our day-to-day decisions while seeking to gain the best return on our investment to ensure a sound transportation infrastructure for the next generation. Greg talked about that next generation. I got 3 boys. I want to make sure they have a great opportunity for a good transportation infrastructure. Accessibility, that has a huge safety component to it, but it's more about consideration of all users to our system. Dr. Ball mentioned that. So whether we're talking about pedestrian, bike, scooter, or vehicles, all need appropriate access to life's opportunities. And our context guide that we rolled out last year will change the way we deliver projects, and adopting more of a Vision Zero philosophy will aid in making our roadways safer for everyone. And lastly, mobility. It's really about taking advantage of the technology and data-driven systems to improve the efficiency of our existing footprint. So we're looking at ways we can use data, smart devices. We've used the smart signals right there on US 1, just south of Elk Ridge, to be more efficient with our projects and deliver for the future. So I thank you for your time, and I'm going to turn it over to our MDOT teammate at MDTA, Jim Ports.
Okay, thank you. I hope everyone can hear me. Yes?
I'm sorry.
Okay. I am not Jim Ports, but I am from the Maryland Transportation Authority. I'm Melissa Williams, the Director of Planning and Program Development. MDTA maintained operations, completed Bay Bridge projects, and advanced other initiatives during COVID-19. With reduced revenue, we changed some operations and delayed some work. All electronic or cashless tolling statewide began on March 17th in order to limit contact for both the traveling public and our toll collectors. After closing in March, we reopened EasyPass customer service centers on June 15th with limited capacity and safety precautions in place. Some key MDTA accomplishments during COVID-19 include we completed work to reopen the Bay Bridge westbound right lane, installed a new tolling gantry, and delivered full-time all-electronic tolling in advance of our summer goal. We advanced major projects, including the I-895 Bridge project in Baltimore and the new Nice Middleton Bridge in Southern Maryland. We worked to develop Drive Easy MD toll modernization, which includes new payment options such as pay by plate and early payment notice of toll due discounts, as well as a new website that will go live later this year. We also reduced civil penalty from $50 to $25 for toll violations. Additional features such as new vehicle toll classifications with lower toll rates will roll out in phases once the new tolling system goes live. Reductions to the MDTA budget due to COVID-19 means projects needed to be deferred. The I-95 Express Toll Lanes project has been deferred by 1 year, and cash flows for the Nice Middleton Bridge replacement have been reduced in the draft fiscal year 2021 to fiscal year 2026 CTP. This is because the project completed more work in fiscal year 2020 than originally forecasted. Therefore, there's no change in the overall budget for the project, just a change in the cash flow. MDTA major projects that have been preserved include the I-895 Bridge project, which includes one lane remains open in each direction north of the Harbor Tunnel. The new northbound bridge and Holabird Ave exit ramp opened in March of 2020. A new southbound bridge and tunnel rehabilitation remains under construction. This project is expected to be completed in 2021. Concerning the Bay Crossing Tier 1 NEPA study, it is still ongoing. We anticipate publishing the Tier 1 draft environmental impact statement and identifying MDTA's recommended preferred corridor alternative in the fall of 2020 and holding public hearings in early 2021. The Tier 1 final environmental impact statement and record of decision are scheduled for 2021. If you would like more information about this project, I encourage you to visit baycrossingstudy.com. Bay Bridge ongoing and future work includes the westbound deck rehabilitation of the center and left lanes, Bay Bridge crossover automated lane closure system, and the contract being awarded for the eastbound deck rehabilitation. Thank you very much, and I would now like to turn it over to Administrator Quinn from MTA. Kevin?
Oh,
There you go.
they took me off mute. Wonderful. Great. I gave a great intro, similar to you, County Executive. It was beautiful. Well, thanks so much for having us. I'm Kevin Quinn, Administrator of MDOT MTA. We're one of the largest multimodal transit systems in the United States, operating local bus, light rail, metro, and mobility paratransit in the Baltimore region, and MARC and commuter bus statewide, as well as supporting all of our great locally operated transit systems that we have throughout the state of Maryland. As noted, COVID-19 really resulted in a major decline of Marylanders' use of transportation services across the state, including MTA, where we really began seeing pretty dramatic ridership decreases starting in mid-March that had a pretty big impact on our fare revenues. As the Secretary mentioned, the second week of April, really during the peak of the stay-at-home order, transit was at an all-time low. Compared with just last week, at all-time low, MARC was down 97%. We're down 90% now. Commuter bus was down 95% at the peak. It's down 87% now. And our core local bus was down 61%, and we're down 53% now. And throughout this COVID-19 pandemic, our focus has really been on cleaning, especially our buses, our rail cars, keeping employees safe, and really repositioning our services to focus on the core mission of the agency and really those greatest areas of need. We did accomplish some pretty cool things, though, during COVID. In August, we launched real-time tracking for MARC Train via the Transit app, which is also used for our local bus system and the commuter bus system. So Howard County residents can now use the Transit app to track commuter bus and MARC all on one app. We also revamped our MARC website to provide those same real-time arrival predictions. And in response to COVID-19, Howard County is receiving $7.4 million in federal CARES Act funds to support operating and capital needs for transit in the county. There have been some reductions, though, to the Transportation Trust Fund due to COVID-19 that has meant that transit operations have needed to be cut back a bit. We've made some pretty difficult service level decisions, and we, as you noted, County Executive announced some strategic reductions in our core bus, our MARC train, and our commuter bus services to meet our FY21 operating budget. And rather than kind of just system-wide cuts that we think would really result in infrequent, unreliable service to our riders, we've really tried to take more of a scalpel, if you will, approach that maintains a high level of service on our most frequently utilized routes and those that have continued to see strong ridership during COVID-19. The routes and kind of the system that we've proposed really focuses on connecting Baltimore City with major job centers, but it does have fewer suburban routes. And so in Howard County, as you noted, the Express Bus 150 is proposed to be discontinued. Commuter buses proposed changes include reducing frequency on several routes while retaining the overall span of service on each route, essentially the hours that it's still running. And MARC train proposed changes to include reducing service on the Camden line. So, we've created a dedicated web page for all the service change information at mta.maryland.gov/winter 2021. Public hearing dates for the local bus changes and those service reductions will be held October 2nd to the 15th, and we're going to continue to accept comments until November 16th. And public hearing dates for MARC train and the commuter bus changes will be announced in the coming weeks. We're still doing some analysis there. We really recognize and really put a lot of value in public feedback in determining those those final service changes. And so we're really encouraging the public to submit comments on those proposed changes. Additionally, due to the sharp decline in transportation revenues, state matching funds for local transit projects are not available in this year's CTP. And so we're going to be really coordinating closely with local transit operators to discuss the availability of local matching funds and to apply some of that CARES funding and available federal funding to support those critical local needs that we know are there. We were able to preserve several critical projects in the capital budget. primarily in fleet modernization with our metro, our light rail, and an investment of $54 million to overhaul 63 Mark III passenger coaches. That is advancing, and 7 of those coaches are currently in service. A couple key plans and other initiatives are well underway. You know, the Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan, our 2-year effort in collaboration with an 11-member commission, and that had really extensive public involvement, was finalized in September. Implementation is moving forward with a year 1 action plan, which includes 2 new corridor feasibility studies, some ADA accessibility and transfer hub work, and new platforms that we're creating for regional dialogue and collaboration. We're also undertaking a 50-year statewide transit plan, a really exciting effort, and we're looking forward to working with Howard County and stakeholders really across the state to develop this long-term vision and framework for really coordinating transit service in Maryland. It's a fantastic project. With that, I will turn it over to Administrator Chrissy Nizer at the Motor Vehicle Administration. Chrissy.
Thank you, Kevin, and County Executive and members of the delegation. It's a pleasure to be with you again this evening. At MDOT MBA, we continue to focus on delivering that premier customer service that all of our residents of Maryland deserve. Even though our branch offices did shut down during the height of the COVID emergency, we had many MDOT MBA employees hard at work delivering those licenses and ensuring emergency services as well as supply chain with our commercial drivers. During that time, we established an emergency email address and phone number to ensure that individuals could contact us directly. We opened several branch offices for commercial driver licensing testing and used our mobile bus to go directly to our large employers and do testing there. We also, for the first time ever, added online options for our commercial drivers. They can now actually renew licenses, get duplicates online. That was never an option before, and that's something we implemented very quickly during the closure. To demonstrate the hard work that our employees did during that time of the closure, they actually processed 740,000 transactions, which I think is pretty remarkable. We also are really proud of working with several state agencies as well as local health departments and using our beep stations, including in Howard County, to provide access to COVID testing. Obviously, that was a critical service for our residents, and we're really proud to be part of that partnership of the agencies coming together to make that happen. We reopened our branch offices June 8th by appointment only. That was 17 of the offices, and the remaining opened by July 20th. The appointments process really allows us to control the number of people in the branch at any given time and maintain that appropriate social distance. You will notice differences when you visit us at our branch offices. Obviously, everybody is wearing masks as we're used to and face coverings. But we also will ask several questions before you come in. We'll do a temporal screening. We'll also have those plexiglass dividers that we've become used to just to keep everybody safe in the offices. In addition, we've worked with our driver education schools to allow the driver education classroom portion to now be done online for the first time ever, as well as our driving test has been modified so the instructor is not in the vehicle with the applicant performing the test. And so those are some modifications that we've made to keep everybody safe. We are proud that we're still able to deploy our Customer Connect IT modernization on July 6th, despite all the challenges that everybody was going through during that time. Phase 1 included our vehicle services, business licensing, and our motor carrier services. It allows our businesses and our customers really more access to online transactions than they ever had before. Just to mention a few things that our customers can now do, you can now update your insurance company directly online. You can submit documentation to us about an insurance case you might have. If you need to get a disability placard, you can actually complete that process completely online. You can start the application, your doctor can respond and provide the certification. You never need to come in a branch office, and you can get that disability placard mailed to you, which is great, especially for our more vulnerable customers. You can also start your title and registration application from the comfort of your home. That's one of the more complicated transactions we have, and so the ability to start that, know what documents you need, it makes it a lot easier for our customers. Obviously, all of this is about convenience and wait times at our branch offices and trying to, enable customers really to think first about what can be done online before thinking about coming in person. As Secretary Slater mentioned, obviously the decrease in revenue impacted all of the business units, and so we've had to adjust operations and defer some key projects. From MBA, that means adjustments to our facilities and some of our smaller IT projects that we were going to do. But despite that, we are really happy that we're still moving forward with a phase 2 of Customer Connect. That'll be the driver portion of our business, and that'll finally give us that 360 view of the customer and be able to open up even more services online that customers will be able to enjoy. We're also working hard on Real ID. We are glad that the federal government extended the deadline on that to October 1 of 2021. Maryland is doing well. We're at 70% compliance with Real ID. DHS just announced that nationwide compliance is about 38%. So we're certainly doing well compared to the national average. And I think last year when I spoke to you, I mentioned that Howard County was the highest jurisdiction in terms of Real ID compliance. I'm happy to tell you once again, you are at 73%, the highest jurisdiction in the state in terms of Real ID compliance. So good work there. We are also really focused on highway safety, as you've heard from all of the speakers tonight. We were happy to work with you with the $290,000 that was just announced by Governor Hogan for the agencies for highway safety. That includes the Howard County Police Department, as well as the Kraft Center for Research and Education, both really good projects. We are also announcing a new campaign called Be the Driver, and it's all about that personal responsibility each of us have. So I encourage you to help get that word out about that new plan. We are working on our highway safety plan, and the new one will be from 2021 to 2025. And I really do want to commend the work that Howard County is doing in developing your own plan. I know it's something we've talked about in the last years, and you guys are really close. You've done good work on that, and I want to thank you for your commitment to seeing that through. I truly believe it makes a difference when the local jurisdictions adopt those plans. So overall, we remain committed to being the best we can, whether it's in highway safety or in customer service, and it's all about providing that critical services to the residents. I want to just end by just commending our employees who've done a remarkable job, really frontline employees every day coming in and making those processes work for Maryland residents. So with that, I'll stop and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Ricky Smith, the Executive Director of MAA.
Thank you very much, Christy. Can everyone hear me? I'm going to take that as a yes.
That's a yes.
Okay. Good to see you, Dr. Ball, my county executive, and members of the delegation. Like airports across the nation, BWI Thurgood Marshall has seen reduced passenger and airline activity since the early spring. Prior to COVID, we were actually pacing on our 4th consecutive record-setting year. While passenger traffic remained well below a typical summer, BWI Marshall has experienced some improving numbers in recent weeks. April was the low point of passenger traffic, with BWI passenger traffic dropping nearly 96%. But we did see some airline and passenger traffic return over the summer. For July, for example, BWI Marshall passenger traffic was 50% of the entire Washington area market. For the second straight month, the total at BWI Marshall was more than Reagan National and Dulles combined, which is remarkable. We're normally about 37, 38% of the market, still the predominant airport in the market, but about 38%. We're now 51%. For the Labor Day weekend, TSA performed 15,125 screenings in just one day at BWI Marshall security checkpoints. This was the highest count in nearly 6 months. The aviation industry expects a forecast of at least 2 to 3 years to regain COVID levels. Be that as it may, BWI Marshall remains well positioned for when the industry begins its true recovery. At the same time, a bright spot in all of this, BWI Marshall has continued to see increasing cargo activity due largely to the emergence and the growth of Amazon Prime's activity. I do want to take a minute to talk about some of the accomplishments. I must acknowledge our staff and our partners for working so hard throughout the pandemic to maintain critical operations on behalf of our customers. The service that we provide to our customers are so dependent on the workers, the human capital at the airport, and so we always appreciate and we cannot acknowledge them enough for the work that they put in. And we continue to utilize enhanced screening and sanitation procedures to help ensure a safe, healthy airport for customers and employees. The airport, the TSA, and our airline partners installed protective shields at document checking stations, ticket counters, and information desks throughout the terminal and the rental car facility. We provide hand sanitizer stations throughout the terminal. Passengers and employees are required to wear mask coverings or masks based on an executive order issued by Governor Hogan a couple months ago. We acted swiftly in the spring to provide rent relief to airlines and concessions in order to maintain customer amenities and jobs. Our food and retail operators are true partners. They're important to our customer service with our passengers, and so we wanted to make sure that they remained as healthy as possible so that they can continue to provide that role. Today, currently, about 52% of our food and retail concessions are open to serve travelers. The Federal CARES Act allocated $87 million to help fund BWI Marshall and Martin State Airport operations, helping to offset revenue loss related to COVID. The draft CTP reflects a temporary pause on some major work for BWI Marshall, primarily related to expansive concourse AB connector and baggage handling system project. That construction work, originally planned to start over the summer, was slowed while the industry continues to recover. This large-scale project will support further domestic and international growth for Southwest Airlines, our hub carrier, the largest airline partner at BWI Marshall. This project will be largely funded by airport revenue bonds. This project will be largely, as I said, funded by revenue bonds, but the work is paused until the market for these bonds has been stabilized. Is moving on to some key projects that we're able to preserve. A number of those projects are reflected in the CTP. These projects include important work on near-term needs, particularly related to safety. MDOT MAA will continue to support and foster aviation across Maryland by working with our 35 public use airports in the state. For fiscal year 2021, MAA intends to provide $2,350,000 in state, local, and state support for regional airports across Maryland. Now, this funding source is actually the Secretary's budget, Secretary Slater. So thank you for that continued support to the state's airport system. The 5-gate extension of Concourse A is nearing completion. Our work is basically done, and the 3 new food and retail concessions are continuing to build out their operations. We continue to work with the FAA on the extensive environmental assessment process for the next phase of improvements at BWI Marshall and Martin State Airports. We're finalizing the design process for a major terminal restroom renovation program, and we expect to begin construction in early 2021. Replacement snow removal equipment and airfield vehicles will continue as a part of our funding process. But we know the global airline and passenger traffic will rebound, and across MDOT MAA, we are working to be prepared when the industry recovers. With that being said, let me turn it back over to Transportation Secretary Gregory Slater. Greg?
Thank you, Ricky, and the whole team. I just want to thank everyone and thank the executive for the opportunity to discuss our 6-year program. At this point, I will turn it back over to County Executive Dr. Calvin Ball, if I recall correctly, a fellow Towson Tiger, to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you so much. And yes, I'm definitely a Tiger. Again, Secretary Slater, you and your team have been so helpful and so collaborative. I am very pleased with the things that I've heard thus far. I know there's been a great deal of work during these challenging times, but I think we are continuing to push forward. We're continuing to collaborate and be creative in addressing issues. And I don't want to take too much more time because I think we have delegation members from the state and local level who have several questions. And so I will turn it over to them and allow them to take the balance of this evening.
I think Delegate Ebersol had the first question.
Oh, thanks so much, Bruce. So first of all, Secretary Slater, thank you for highlighting Kim Lamphere Those of us who knew her were privileged too, and I'm so glad that we're honoring her still. Chrissy Nizer, thanks so much for your help last year, kind of sorting some things out about Real ID, and let us pass a little legislation, which isn't as relevant now, but will be again soon. Both Mr. Smith and Mr. Quinn talked about the future. By the way, Mr. Smith, you had a Bowman, Maryland logo in your background. You had me at hello. Okay, it was great right there. So what we're doing is we're pulling back on some of our service here. I feel the 150 line is disappearing. I would like to think that we're looking far enough ahead to think that this would sort of be an opportunity when we come back, when we begin to reestablish this. Mr. Quinn, you heard me say this the other day, to begin to maybe focus on pushing toward more rail when we come back. I hate to bring up a bad subject, but basically the 150 is an east-west line, and we lost an east-west line. And I want to know if we're beginning to have a long-range plan to begin to create rail that will service. That east-west line could have ultimately been extended into Howard County, out the Route 70 corridor, to create something similar. And I know that's a big ask, but what I'm basically curious to know is this something that in the arc of things now, as much as we are pulling back, can we retrain the population to begin to look toward rail, and can we provide that with them in a simple sense by and we talked about this before, reestablishing some of the MARC line, some of the MARC line runs that are being made, but as well as beginning to think about larger rail projects that we can establish. And I want to know if that's on the board, or if you're thinking about that, or if you're not, I would sure like to hope you would.
Thank you, Delegate Ebersol. Let me touch, and then I'll see if Administrator Quinn can kind of add to that. But in our Central Maryland Regional Transit, a number of real opportunities across the board, and some of which were those really critical east-west corridors. And I think we see that as a big part of our statewide transit plan and how we can do that. There were a number of other opportunities that were laid out in documents like our MARC reinvestment plan and those types of things that we're looking more on the rail side, but we do see some similar opportunities. Let me see if Kevin wants to kind of expand on that, but I certainly agree with you.
Thank you.
I'll just note that we do have our MARC Cornerstone plan, which is our kind of long-term plan that does lay out kind of the future for MARC service and for MARC expansion. And so I think that's a good document that really lays out a series of milestones that need to happen to expand MARC service. I'll also just note that we have 2 corridor studies that are funded as part of the CTP that do consider all modes, including rail. And so, certainly rail is on the table, if that's your question.
Pretty much, yes. I hope you guys are working that way. Thanks.
Delegate Feldmark, did you want to add?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Secretary Slater. Thank you to the entire team for your presentation and for the work you're doing. And Secretary Slater, I know the county executive mentioned this in his remarks, but you've had one heck of a first year, and really do appreciate what you're trying to do. I know it's a tough time, and I do think we can and should and need to be partners in finding better solutions to some of the proposed cuts. There are a couple things couple areas of concerns that I want to touch on, and one is equity. And I think my colleague Delegate Ebersol certainly picked up on a piece of this. There seems to be a disproportionate impact of the cuts on the Baltimore region, and that following on the loss of the Red Line is really disappointing and disconcerting. And I know we can do better, and I think you have some willing partners here in the delegation to help find those solutions. The other aspect of equity that I think is concerning here is that cuts to transit really exacerbate the disproportionate impact that we're seeing in this pandemic, right? The residents who depend on transit and will depend on transit to recover from this pandemic are those who have been hit hardest by it. And I just think we need to take that into account and and be working on better solutions there. And the other area of concern is really just keeping an eye on the longer term plans and benefits and investments that we need to be making. And I think that ties into my last point about the disproportionate impact of transit cuts, is that transit is going to be a critical link in our economic recovery from this pandemic. When we think about the number of people who are unemployed right now and the number of potential jobs that could be, lost or someone's unable to accept a job because of a lack of transportation. And I understand that, you focus on job centers, but I really think we need to be looking at the investment the state can make in transit as a critical component in the economic recovery from this pandemic. And if we say we can't do it until the revenue is back, then we're missing that opportunity to be part of the recovery, right? Also, in terms of, keeping a long-term view specifically, and Administrator Quinn heard this the other evening, as we look at the MARC service cuts, I'm very concerned about the long-term impact of those cuts. Bus service can be restored as soon as the funding is back. But if we lose those time slots with CSX and have to fight to get them back, who knows when we will or at what cost. So I really think if we can't avoid cutting the service, we need to at least have a placeholder, some mechanism to maintain those time slots with CSX. And the other long-term piece, and again, I know we're in a crisis right now. The pandemic has got us focused on the immediate needs and the immediate shortfalls in our revenue. But as we think about sustainability of the Transportation Trust Fund, before we saw the dramatic drop from the pandemic, we were seeing the challenges of a model based on fuel consumption. And as we make progress in fuel efficiency, we need to have a model where that progress in fuel efficiency does not hurt our progress in transportation infrastructure and services. And, I think as we, the Secretary said in his comments, continuing to rethink, and I hope that's one of the things you're rethinking, because we really need to take this opportunity to think long-term about a more sustainable model there. And I'd love to hear what thoughts you might have on that.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Delegate Feldmark. Let me touch on a few of those points, and then I'd like to see if Kevin can follow up with some of the numbers that are really important in some of the proposals that we have. But first and foremost, let me touch on, and Bruce will try not to laugh when I say the easiest question about the transportation funding model, because we've been debating that one for a few years now. But I think it comes down to there's a lot of national debate on a variety of different scenarios, whether it's vehicle miles traveled or whether it's a freight model or whether it's something along that line. Many of those are being kind of fleshed out in a variety of different research projects, and just rest assured to know that we're at the table with them and really trying to understand those as best we can, so that we can provide information when it's needed about what's the best model for Maryland and what Maryland can do in kind of playing that role as well. Let me then touch on a little bit on the solutions. I agree with you wholeheartedly that as we continue to look back at what options we have, what alternatives we have to some of these painful operational cuts, we would be absolutely looking back to you and members of the delegation for your ideas as well, and to get those thoughts. The collaboration and kind of sharing of ideas is really how we're going to solve these issues, and we need to kind of work that together. I would argue the same thing on the long-term vision and really separating that as You know, when we lay out a transportation plan or a statewide transit plan, we can't do that in isolation. We need to do that in collaboration with the local government. Take transit alone, where local transit systems have to have interconnectivity with our state services, and our local roadways have to have interconnectivity with our state roads. And frankly, the people that we all serve, I don't think they don't care whether they're on a state road or a county road or a state transit system or a county transit system. They just need to get where they want to get to. So their expectation is that we're going to collaborate and work together. So my expectation is that we're going to collaborate and work together. So you have my assurances that we will absolutely do that. And then I'll finish on the equity piece, because I think that's a really important component for everything that we do. And we've been having a lot of discussions on that. And so the proposal that we have out there today, deep down inside the data, started with that. And so what we did was we really looked at where we had low income, transit dependent households, zero car households, and laid out a scenario as part of our high frequency transit network. We were actually enhancing service in some of those areas to try and add more access to opportunity in those areas as we were developing the scenario that had some of the painful cuts on some of the other routes. But Kevin may have some of the accessibility numbers, but that was really important to us as well. Frankly, what I saw in Baltimore was our transit system, our core bus system in particular, in the height of this pandemic, didn't come near the impact that we were seeing across the nation and in some of the other systems. And what that told me, I don't want to say it told me that, but what it validated for me was how dependent the Baltimore community is on that transit system, and how dependent that essential workforce, and I would argue that that's the essential workforce that keeps this whole region running, is dependent on our transit network there. So, we really think about that hard in what we're trying to do, and where we end up with, we're hoping we can really think hard about that as well as part of the conversation. But Kevin, maybe some of those accessibility numbers to me were really powerful when we were looking at some of those.
Yeah, I mean, I think, equity was a key piece of it. And so, we took a real data-driven approach, taking a look at that and taking a look at those folks that demonstrate kind of high transit propensity. And so being sure that those folks that need transit have access to transit. And so the proposal that we've put out there does maintain transit for 98% of folks within a quarter mile, so that access is there. There is access to transit. And also across the disability spectrum. That's something else that we wanted to really be sure we focused on. But the frequent transit network, that piece increases. As Secretary Slater noted, we really tried to focus on keeping the core of the system together, so that frequent transit network expands from 18 to 20 routes. Those are routes coming at regular frequencies where people don't need a schedule, and we see some good increases in that access being provided to both minority residents as well as low-income households to increase that access. And so, the reductions are impactful, and I want to be clear that I don't think the Secretary or I are trying to kind of sugarcoat them or to say they're not impactful. They are impactful. And I think, what we're trying to convey is we've tried to take as equitable as an approach as we can, given the budget scenario that we're dealt with here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to add one other piece on the MARC piece, because as you talked about the importance of or Secretary Slater did, about the importance of the connection between the state and local, both transit networks and road networks, part of that collaboration between the state and the county is that our land use planning was around the Camden line, in terms of transit-oriented development and things that were planned. And for years, we've been working on trying to increase service on the Camden line. And so that, the timing of this pulling back is really concerning in terms of that long-term planning that was already underway.
I'll just note, just in kind of response to that I hear your concern. I think, as we discussed the other night, the loss of those CSX slots, we've got to figure out a good long-term solution to that. And so To be clear, the trips that we are looking at removing from the schedule are those kind of reverse peak trips. So for example, in the AM, you primarily have Baltimore to DC ridership. Those AM trips that we're looking at are the reverse peak, where you have DC to Baltimore going north, which, to be quite frank, has very, very few people on it right now, as we are taking a look at ridership trends, and again, taking a data-driven approach. There just aren't many people making that commute these days. And similarly, in the PM, that reverse trip from Baltimore to DC. So, ridership is playing a key piece of this, but to your point about the longer term impacts of cuts and those slots, I hear you loud and clear.
Okay, I think we have questions from Council Chair Young and Delegate Watson as well. So whoever wants to unmute, there'll be a draw the mic here.
Hey, this is Delegate Watson with a low battery. So, Deb, if it's okay with you, can I go?
Go ahead, Courtney. Ms. Low Battery.
very quickly, I want to say a word of thanks to all of you for your really consistently outstanding constituent service when we call with particular things we need help with. Recently, you retimed a traffic light on Route 40 that was somehow got itself off track, and we appreciate that. It was a constituent that called in and said, hey, I don't think this light's working right, and sure enough, it wasn't. So you took care of that pretty quickly. And another example is Longgate Parkway in Weeds, when someone called in and said, hey, these weeds are out of control. You took care of that. So thank you for that. We really appreciate your consistent high level of customer service. Then my question for you is about the intersection of North Ridge Road and Route 40. I know that you've made some improvements in terms of striping, but is there any, could you just give me a quick status of what's going on with that intersection and what the plans are for the future? Can you hear me?
You're muted, Greg.
Sorry, I was again saying something I'm sure that was wonderful and mute, but let me see if Administrator Tim Smith or District Engineer Terry Seuss is on. I know Terry and her team have been working that project pretty closely and been trying to advance some things there.
Yeah, so let me take a stab at it, and then Terry is much smarter than me. She'll fill in the gaps. So I know like you mentioned, we did some puppy tracks there and improved some of the movements there at that location. The challenge is we need to, there's a lot of existing developments and a lot of potential new developments going in there. So we're trying to make sure we have an overall assessment of the long-term planning needed, but in order to make sure we have a proper adjustment to that. But let me turn it over to Terry and see if she has any additional details, more short term.
So yes, we were able to resurface and restripe. We were able to get one more lane in the northbound direction, which we've seen and have heard that is working really well for a project that was that didn't add any extra pavement in the intersection. So we're very happy with that. And as Tim mentioned, we're looking for something where we can do a little bit of widening, make that work a little bit better, but that's more longer term, and we're in the preliminary stages with that.
Okay. I have not heard any complaints about the striping, so that's good. And, I feel like you guys are on top of, you understand the problems with the intersection and are trying to figure out the best solution. So just keep us updated as you move through that, please. And thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
I think we can go to our council chair next.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Gardner, for recognizing me. And Secretary Slater, thank you very much for joining us this evening and giving us all this great information. And to your team as well, we really appreciate them all being on this virtual world with us trust me, as council chair, I'm extremely familiar with this virtual world, more so than anybody would ever hope to be. I want to state at the outset that I listened carefully to County Executive Ball's statement, and I think that he did a great job of expressing our many concerns on the county level about these cuts. Delegates Ebersol and Feldmark, I think we would echo, those of us on the county council would echo the great need to restore these Camden Line train times as quickly as possible, recognizing that during this pandemic and with the lower ridership, there's a reason to cut out some of this transit, but the whole Howard County, we're sort of landlocked when it comes to public transportation. We don't have a big train station like Baltimore City. We don't have a great metro like Montgomery County. So we are sitting right here in the middle and growing at this incredibly rapid rate. Hundreds of new units are being planned right now to come into Howard County. And we are stuck with highways as a way to go from here to there, with a huge percentage of our people traveling, as County Executive Ball said, in both directions, and with people also traveling down 32 to NSA. We are surrounded by state roads and federal highways that have become parking lots. And without this public transit alternative, it's going to be hard for us to attract young people, because young people don't want to sit in their cars on highways or state roads or county roads. They want to be able to get to places by public transit or walking or biking. That's their preference. And if we are going to grow Howard County as a hub and as a business hub, we really need that public transit to continue as much as possible. And people like riding on trains more than they do on buses. So cutting that Camden line is really that it's critical to get it back as soon as you can. So I just want to echo those comments that delegates in the county executive have made. And then I want to bring up a couple of other things. I'm also the county council's representative to the BWI Roundtable, which creates, as everybody who lives in this area in Howard County, particularly where my neighborhood happens to be located, and in Anne Arundel County as well, an amazing amount of noise over our heads every single day. And even though the plane traffic is down a huge percentage, the Amazon cargo planes that fly over our houses starting at 5:30 a.m. using this next gen air flight pattern are still continuing to fly. They actually did stop for about 2 months, and it was a pleasure for those of us who live here, but they have started up again. And they have continued this next gen pattern that flies low and one after another after another. And I'm sure that Mr. Smith is very familiar with these next gen patterns. And I'm hoping that maybe during this time of lessened airline traffic, that we could use this as an opportunity to address the next gen airline patterns, so that we could try and do something seriously about how we can relieve this noise congestion and this environmental health situation that we are dealing with who live under next gen. That's one thing. And then since Delegate Watson did bring up a couple of local items, now I feel like I can too. So thank you, Delegate Watson, for opening the door to that. And I would like to, I guess, ask Mr. Smith about an update on Route 29 in River's Edge neighborhood and what you all are doing there. And this may be one of those moments where, oh, we don't have any money, so we can't do anything. And I can say, oh, good. So that's a great thing. So I don't, and then I had a question about the 108 widening. over by Route 29. First, I do want to thank the SHA team who met with the neighbors on 108. I was unbelievably impressed that I think it was 4 people who came to the home of one of the people whose yard will be impacted by that 108 widening. And that was remarkable constituent service. I was really thrilled to see the level of interest and I'm just wondering what has occurred since that meeting with those neighbors and if they are continuing the discussion. So the 108-29 and the Route 29 River's Edge.
Let me first your director Ricky, see if he wants to offer on kind of where the next gen situation is, and then I'll turn to Tim Smith to talk about the 108 work as well as the very challenging situation we have at 29 River's Edge. So Ricky, are you on still?
Yes, I'm on, Greg. Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for raising the point about next gen. As you know, we formed a roundtable. We worked with a group of representative stakeholders, form a roundtable, and I must take this opportunity to commend them on doing amazing work. Howard County was well represented, is still well represented on this roundtable, and they did great work to come up with a set of proposed solutions in partnership with the Maryland Aviation Administration, Southwest Airlines, other airport partners, to first form a special task force to come up with a set of recommendations that have been presented to the FAA to correct some of the issues that we're experiencing. I'm a resident of Ellicott City, and so I know exactly what you're referring to. To address many of those issues, those recommendations are now sitting with the FAA. The FAA has committed to consider those recommendations as a part of a process. Without getting too technical, a process is a very formal process, a somewhat secretive process that they have allowed us to participate in to review those recommendations, and then they will get back to us, to the roundtable, on their approval. Either they will approve them in total or some version of the recommendations. And so we're pretty optimistic that the FAA is going to give real consideration to those flight paths. It's not going to correct all problems, but at least it will be a beginning to correct some of the issues that we're all experiencing with next year. Can't hear you.
WI roundtable. So I'm very familiar with those proposals. I've been to every meeting that we've had over the last 2 years. I know what those proposals look like. I'm familiar with the task force, and I would agree with you that Howard County is extremely well represented.
Yes, I know you would.
We've got some very, very smart people who are part of this group. But those proposals and the roundtable participants would agree with this. They don't go nearly far enough. They are tiny changes for a few flights, and we need to go much further and much higher. That's all we need to do is go higher. If we can go higher, everybody will be happier. So I have this opportunity to talk to you personally, even though it's virtually. I can't pass it up because I can't tell you how strongly myself and the constituents who live under this very, very low flight pattern are impacted every single day. I am glad that we're doing something with the FAA, but we need a big push. They should be thrilled that they have a great airport like BWI, thrilled that we are allowing the BWI airport, that we're putting so many resources into the BWI airport, and that we are allowing it to be expanded this way. Thrilled that we are building huge warehouses for Amazon so that they can bring their trucks to the Mid-Atlantic area, which is a wonderful place for them to be able to fan out to the entire East Coast. Right. Thrilled, thrilled, thrilled. They owe us. We don't owe them. They owe us to say, if we're going to do all of this for the entire East Coast and allow all these people to do all this expansion, then they need to say, we're not going to continue to hurt the people who live under these flight patterns, we're willing to change them.
Well, I think the participants on the roundtable have made that point loudly and clearly.
Okay, good. And I'm trying to make it too, Mr. Smith. Okay.
No, but thank you very much.
All
I
right.
understand where you're coming from. All right.
If Tim can give us an update on River's Edge as well as the 108 work, Tim or Sarah.
Yeah, so US 29 at River's Edge. The best way to describe this is we have a known, Greg mentioned it several times, we definitely use a data-driven process to get us to that point. We have a known safety risk there just with the number of accidents we're having on US 29. So we're looking at opportunities where we can make those improvements to cut down. We're basically looking at about 20 accidents on average a year. What we want to do is we met with the community once and they had a focus group. We had one planned in July, but just with the pandemic and everything, we kind of wanted to do that in person. So we're looking for a way to kind of rebrand that. And then we're all, as you mentioned, we run into some of our economic challenges. So what we want to make sure we're doing is we know we have, like I said, we know we have a known safety risk. We want to improve it, but we also want to collaborate and include feedback from the community to make sure at least they understand why we're doing it and make it as least impactful as we can. We met with Howard County as well. We're looking for opportunities to give them different egresses out of the community other than US 29. That's
what they need. Yes, thank you. That is exactly what they need. And if you can do that, they'll be okay. If you can find that secret pathway, then we will be all good here at River's Edge. So thank you very much for finding that.
Yeah, and like I said, we're pursuing those opportunities, just trying to figure out the best way to do that. And trust me, a lot of the parents there are the same. We both our kids go to the same high school, so I get feedback there as well. So.
Do you live in Howard County too?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you live in District 4? Do you live in my district? 3. Okay. So your kids go to Reservoir?
No, they go to Hammond.
They go to Hammond. Okay.
Go Hammond. Go D3.
So you mentioned.
I'm sorry, I did get a little personal there.
You narrowed it down to a district. You're good.
I did.
The other item was, I think, Maryland 108 at US 29. So I'm probably going to have Terry jump in to help me a little bit. I know, and that's very much what when Greg was sitting in my seat, he very much, preached. He got up on the pulpit. We needed to be more inclusive and include and better understand what the community impacts when we have a transportation project. So we've definitely tried to do that. And I'm glad to hear our staff was reaching out to the residents. That's great to hear. But I know we have a widening project there. I think it's due to be advertised later this year. But I'll let Terry kind of fill you in on any details I might be missing.
Okay.
Sure. So that is an intersection improvement at Maryland 108 and Centennial Lane. We have a great partnership with Howard County on that one. They are, we have an agreement and they are contributing funding to that project as well. So that we did meet with the residents. We are advertising the project for construction in December. So we will start construction in the spring of 21. We did meet with the residents. We were able to reduce some of the right-of-way impacts associated with the stormwater management and the utility relocations. And from everything.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. That was great. That was what they were really concerned about. So I really appreciate that. Beautiful.
Thanks to my team. Yes.
Yes. All right. I haven't heard back from them. So I assume that you had resolved it.
I think everything I've heard is that it's going very well. So.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Greg, I think Senator Lamb had something he wanted to ask or say.
Absolutely, Senator.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Bruce and Mr. Secretary. I guess the benefit of looks like I'm going to be last means that most of what I was going to say has already been said. I think, we did have a meeting last week with Administrator Quinn to talk about some of the service reductions, echo, what my colleagues mentioned earlier about the reductions in transit and in rail. won't dwell on that again, but I did want to I think I would be remiss representing an area that overlaps with Councilwoman Young's location in Howard County to not also just put an exclamation point on the BWI noise issue. I hear it above where I am as well. The councilman is not located too far away from me. We both hear this concern. We hear it from our constituents as well. This seems to be a continual problem that has stretched over years, and we still continue to hear from this. And so, I just wanted to emphasize that we will continue to work on this issue. This is not one that I think either of us are going to be satisfied with anything less than something that resolves this issue for our constituents. We were able to, and I know the secretary was helpful in the past with support for legislation to look at the health effects from the BWI noise. I think there was a lot of statistics early on that were promoting, the number of flights, and we obviously hear them. But to provide the counterpoint that these flights are not without impacts of the communities that are located below. And it stretches wide, as was mentioned, all the way from here in Columbia, all the way down to Annapolis and to the east as well. And so, the bill that was passed was vetoed, but there was a backup plan to include $100,000 in the supplemental budget that was very helpful to have the support of Senator Grange on. And both Senator Grange and myself had attended these BWI roundtable meetings as well. So the supplemental budget included $100,000 for this study, and it will be moving forward and be done. We did meet with Jeff Tosai last week or this week, all the weeks kind of blend together at this point, but to make sure that that funding will go forward for that study, and appreciate your support, Mr. Secretary, on this issue earlier. And again, just want to emphasize that we will continue to work on this issue because it's one that continues to be unresolved. I know it's dragged on for a while, but it's still one that we hear literally all the time.
No, thank you, Senator. I hear you loud and clear on issues that study next gen, as well as the proposed impacts on the transit system that we're looking at some alternatives for, and we will continue to kind of look for that. And I look forward to continued collaboration on all these issues.
Thank you.
Okay, unless we have any other elected officials that have any questions or comments, I'm going to pause for just 1 second. I know we didn't have anything come in from the members of the public, Mr. Secretary, so I'll just pause for a minute to see if anybody else has anything.
It's Christiana here. I mean, I think I'll just reiterate my fellow elected official said. It's, we have the connectivity is really important here, and we're very concerned about those cuts to transit. We really hope that you will take a serious look at that. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I would note that last time we were on a call with Kevin Quinn, we noticed how the background that he has with that bicycle, which is what we're all about in Howard County, is out. And I pulled out one of our RTA buses, Kevin, you could see there in the background. So it's a little bit over the FTA lifespan. So any help you can give us there would be appreciated. And we thank you guys in all seriousness for tonight, but we do want to continue to work with you to figure something out with the next round of the CTP. You've probably got a lot of work ahead of you. I know you're going to have a lot of input in the public hearings. We plan to give you some more input on the public hearings as well. So just end it there and say thank you, and let everybody get. Oops,
Bruce, I'm sorry to jump in at the end here. I just got a text message that Senator Hester is trying to unmute herself and having trouble. So she does have a question. If we can get a little tech support to help,
okay,
that would be great.
Sean, could you unmute Senator Hester? I think I did.
Thank you. I think I've just been unmuted. Can you hear me?
There
Yes.
we go. Yes.
Wonderful. Well, I just wanted to add my thank you for holding this update for us all. And since we're talking local issues, I wanted to thank both the state and the county for the speed with which the Triadelphia Bridge expansion was completed. I know that both the parents and the small businesses over there expressed a lot of concern, as well as the farmers, over the impact on that bridge. And I thought that it happened quite smoothly, and that when there were small requests, they were addressed quite quickly. So I wanted to say thank you for that. The other thing I wanted to continue to draw your attention to is, as 32 continues to be widened, I would like to see at least explored the possibility of a bike lane up and down 32. There's been a lot of clearing of trees, which I protested originally along the side, but it seems like with the trees down, there should be the ability to have some kind of multi-use path along the side. And while I know money is exceptionally tight right now, as we continue that expansion up into Carroll County, part of which I also represent, I just like to keep that dialogue open, because it seems like you can only expand a road so far, and then it gets clogged with more and more cars. And to the extent that we can encourage pedestrians and bikes especially going up and down 32, I think it could be a real boon. So I just want to put a plug out there and a thank you for the Triadelphia Bridge completion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator. I remember thinking back about 10 or 12 years when we worked on a bike plan down that 32 corridor towards Fort Meade. I'm going to pull that out and I'm going to follow up with you and see where that landed. I'd love to take a look at it with you. The opportunities are a little bit different on the Carroll County end, as the utilities are right up on the roadways and the terrain becomes a little bit different when the further at Carroll County on 32, but certainly happy to bring out that study and look at there are any opportunities together.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and to reiterate, that is something the County Office of Transportation is involved in. So we actually had a meeting about a month ago, I believe. David Cookson, who's on the line now, can follow up with you, Senator, to let you know what the work is going on for that Maryland 32 kind of alternate route for bikes. Okay, I'm going to do one more glance at raised hands, at least new raised hands. I don't see anything, so given that we're just before 7 o'clock here, I'll say thank you and good night, Greg. Appreciate it. Anything else from you?
No, just want to thank you, thank the county executive, members of the council, members of the delegation for being on with us. Really good to see everyone. Good to see you, Bruce. We've been in the roller coaster for a long time together, so we'll keep working on it. And thank you for our whole team for spending some time here tonight.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate everybody's participation.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good night.